Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LFAI and Data webinar titled Diverse Data, Robust AI, Unpacking the Power of Data Diversity in Generative AI. My name is Sunny Tsai, Marketing Manager at the Linux Foundation. I'm very excited to kick off the webinar today. So as Gen AI evolves, diverse data is key to fairness, adaptivity, and reliability. And our excellent panel today will discuss its impact, challenges, and best practices for inclusivity and innovation. And as a reminder, this is a live panel discussion, and we want this to be interactive. So throughout the webinar, feel free to drop your questions in the Zoom chat, and we'll set aside the last 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Annie Lai, who is the co-chair of Generative AI Commons at LFAI and Data, to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Sunny. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you again. I'm delighted to welcome you to our third quarterly webinar hosted on behalf of Generative AI Commons. Thank you all for joining us. Today's discussion, Diverse Data, Robust AI, Unpacking the Power of Data Diversity in Generative AI, focus on crucial aspect of AI development, data diversity. Generative AI models are only as strong as the data they learn from. Without diverse data sets, they risk reinforcing biases, underperforming across demographics, and failing in real-world applications. In today's session, we'll explore key questions such as, why is data diversity essential? What are the challenges in obtaining diverse data in AI training? How does it affect model fairness, accuracy, ethical AI development? We'll also discuss practical strategies for measuring and ensuring diversity, the role of synthetic data, and the real-world examples on how diverse data sets have led to better AI outcomes. Join us for an engaging conversation as we examine how organizations, researchers, and open source community can collaborate to build more inclusive, reliable, and high-performing generative AI systems. I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's distinguished panelists. We have Roya, who is a senior generative AI research scientist, Yonghua Lin, who is the VP and Chief Engineer of BAAI. We have Alexei, who is AI and ML Community Architect, Neo4j. Okay, welcome, panelists. I'm glad you can all made it. And so first question is, please spend a minute to introduce yourself and explain your role in generative AI field. Who would like to start? I'll have Alexei start since you're in an Uber. Are you in an Uber? Alexei is dialing in from AI Paris Summit.
Hi guys, yes, I'm Alexei Grobrov. I am in a very fun place. I just attended the next day events at AI Summit, AI Action Summit Paris. I was at Station F, the coolest place in AI, where they had the whole AI Business Day, and they had a huge party with Commander Lang of Hugging Face, Sam Altman of OpenAI, and a whole bunch of cool French startups. So, coming from the heart of diversity. So I am an AI community architect. I build communities in the techno-social community, so that basically the groups gathering around open source, and super happy to be here and representing for G.
Awesome, thank you, Alexei. Next, Roya.
Hi, thank you again for having me here. I'm Roya, based in Boston, and I'm a research scientist focused on generative AI to make sure that not only we have the best application utilizing Gen AI, but also we have the best responsible and ethical practices implemented in place. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Yonghua.
Hi, everyone. This is Yonghua Lin from Beijing Academy of AI. Beijing Academy of AI is the research institute established 6 years ago. We focus on the large model generative AI. And myself in this area, actually, I'm responsible for the open source projects and community in BAAI. And we have the team to responsible for the open source of a lot of data set for the large model. For example, today we already have more than 100 data sets has been open sourced onto the Hugging Face. Besides, we also did a lot of open source, built a lot of language model and other multimodal model and open source. into the Hugging Face and also contribute to the Linux Foundation AI, Linux Foundation AI and Data Foundation. So I'm very happy to have the chance to have the discussion here, because on one hand we have to leverage all those data sets in the world to build our model, and on the other hand, we also make a lot of contribution to build the data set and open source to share with the global community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, panelists. As you can see, we have a very diverse speakers geographically today. I'm from San Francisco. Sunny is from Oregon, Seattle. And Royal is from Boston. Alexi is dialing in from France. So we're dealing with like what, 3-4 time zones. So thank you. I'm glad you made it. So okay, first question. Obviously, the topic of today's panel is data diversity. Could you tell us why data diversity is so important in generative AI? Who would like to start? How about Yonghua? Would you like to start?
Okay, yeah. I think the data diversity, of course, is very important. Since for the AI model, no matter the large model or the small model in 10 years ago, actually the data, especially the training data, we can see it is the textbook to let the machine to learn. So if the data diversity is not enough, then that means that the machine cannot learn in the broad spectrum. So so we just noticed, for example, in last year has some article to discuss how to measure the data set diversity, because on one hand we say the data set diversity is important, but on the other hand, we have different definition for the diversity. For example, in some case, we will very care about the data source, diversity of the data source. For example, if they come from grab from the different webs, or it come from crowdsourcing from a group of people, or it is come from the synthetic generation of the data. So the source of the diversity will be very important. On the other hand, we also will look at the data set composition of the data. For example, if the data come from different background, different language, or different features. And also for example, today, if we look at the general large model, those general purpose large model, then we wanted to have to cover the different domain. So that means the diversity of the industry or diversity of the domain will be very important for the general purpose model. Of course, if we only target for some specific industry, then this diversity might only limit it to this industry area. Okay, and we also will care about the subject of the diversity of the subject. For example, if it related to our human, then we want it to be diversity, cover the different races, cover the different age, different, for example, the human, the female or male, okay? And it will also important to have the diversity of the in the annotation. For example, we wanted to the annotator, okay? When we do the annotation for the data set, we wanted the annotator also have different background, have the neutral, not just have the focus of some specific political trend. Yeah, so that all this is very important for the diversity. Yeah.
Okay. Who else would like to add? Why?
I mean, I can add a little bit. You know, there is different domain data, right? For instance, now we kind of from text chat, we progress to multimodal, but also I think there's a huge amount of work to be done in the real material world. So for instance, industrial AI is a huge area where robotics will be important, automation of supply chains. And so kind of there are startups building the language of robotics, right? They're kind of operating in actually even different kind of space. And I think as you know, AI progresses into new areas, there will be data sets of the new kinds, data sets expressing operations happening in machines, predictive analytics, sequence of processes in factories, and shipping events and so forth, right? So I think also it's very important that we preserve the multitude of the world languages, right? Because LLMs are generally started in English, and I think for the Beijing Academy of Sciences, it is hugely important to preserve the variety, diversity of Chinese language, but also small languages, right? Big countries have resources; they have a lot of institutions. What do we do about Aboriginal languages, small languages? I think it's hugely, hugely important that we don't allow them to disappear, because it becomes very easy now to run machine translation. So there is double incentive for young people to revert to English, right? They kind of spread of English is a global culture in Hollywood and so forth. So I think we represent the diversity of the world here, and we need to uphold the language diversity, and every country should work in this. And if there are small countries who cannot afford yet, I think the big countries must come together in foundations like Linux Foundation to enable global language diversity.
Awesome. Royal, would you like to add?
I think they covered all, but I would like to add one more aspect to the diversity of the data. Given that diversity of the data is important to make sure that our system is generalizable and it doesn't essentially implement bias. I think in addition to looking into a variety of domain and making sure that we consider everybody, we also need to look into the timing. So if the model that we are training right now is good enough, it might not be good tomorrow. So not only we need to look into the space and make sure that we are covering a vast, essentially and diverse amount of data, we need to also look into time and temporal data and how it shifts into our it shifts the data essentially distribution, possibly changing how our models are working.
Absolutely. So yeah, so we have established it's definitely very important to make sure that we have a diverse data. However, data is we're using more and more data, we could be running out of data, and then also data from diverse backgrounds, especially some of the data today are like copyrighted or proprietary. So, what are the challenges that you guys face in obtaining diverse data? And how do you solve those challenges?
I can go first with that. I
Yeah.
think because I was last for the last question, I felt like okay. I think for the challenges of like essentially collecting the data, we need to pay more attention to the quality of the data because there are mathematical way essentially to uh, make the data look like as if it's distributed evenly, but we need to pay attention to how we are doing it because it would cause model overfitting and we easily get a model that looks good on the paper and while we are building it, but essentially it is not good out there. So I encourage the AI scientists who are working on it to actually look into the data and look into processing the system as a feedback loop because the model tells you what they need. And based on what the model gets wrong, you can go back, look into the data and figure out what are the mistakes and what are the shortcomings of the data initially. So you can essentially build those data. You provided this important note on acquiring the data because a lot of the data is either not high quality or they are proprietary or they are copyrighted. I I like to put it more on the laws and regulations that we need to implement. So eventually we will compensate those who provide us with the data, whether it's the literature that we are utilizing for training large language model or people's biometric that we use for anything like a face recognition model. Those who provide the data and own the right to that data should be compensated essentially so we could acquire high quality data without having any ethical and essentially moral concerns.
Okay. How about Yonghua? I know you guys have built a lot of large models and then, targeting the global market. So that makes diversity of data is even more important. So what are the challenges that you have experienced in obtaining diverse data globally?
Yeah. Actually, no matter to get the data globally, or even we need to get enough Chinese data, we still facing a lot of challenges, especially today. A lot of data is isolated in those applications. Yeah. So I remember last year, Ia had the talk. He said the internet data might be used up very soon, right? But actually, I have different observation. Actually, for example, I just use Chinese data as example. Have the statistic. They do the statistic for the Chinese those web page written in Chinese. In 2013, the percentage of the global website written in Chinese is around 4 point something, around between the 4% to 5% in the global. I think that's normal. That's correct. Yeah, 4 to 5%. But now, you know how is the percentage? It's only the 1.3% of the Chinese, the web page written in Chinese in global. Only it dropped a lot from around the 5% drop to the 1.3% in the last 10 years. But in global, actually the people use Chinese to go onto the internet, to go onto applications, still keep the 19% in global. So what happened for those very big drop in the internet web page in Chinese? Because in the past 10 years, those applications, especially those Chinese applications, is very successful. So a lot of enterprise users, individuals, they will publish the high quality data or article in those applications. So currently, we cannot easily to use the Google or other search engine to search those content. So, and I also noticed the same issue in global, because I remember last year I read the article. They do the statistics for the global in English content and say that today they already have 5 or 6 times of the English data. English content is isolated in the different application, including the Facebook, including the X, those kinds of application. So yes, how to break the barrier and let the large model can utilize those high quality data in those applications is the big question. So actually in last 2 years, we also try to make some breakthrough in here, I mean in China. Yes, the fact is we don't have the very good legal or law tools to help us today. Still the very slow the progress to establish the new law or new legal policy to do those type of things. So instead we build a consortium here. We have around 30 to 14 different organizations. And we have the research institute like the BAAI, and also we have those BAT, those internet company, and also have the big, those large model company, and we have these companies together. We said, okay, we create a rule. We each company or organization, they should contribute the data together, and we built a pool, and we some portion of this huge data set. We actually finally we collected around the 8 terabyte data set from all these 30 or 40 company they donate into this pool. For those data without a license issue, we will open source that. So that's why in the last year, we have contributed CCI, the biggest, the largest Chinese data set, and open source it in hydrogen phase. But still have a lot of data. We don't have the clear license claim on those data. So we create a rule that we will do the data quality measurement, and so that we will create a credit for each company they donate the data. For example, if one company they donate a 100 gigabyte, have good quality, they may get the 100 points, and they can use this credit point to do the exchange within this pool. So in last year, have around 40 company or organization, we contribute the data together, and amount us around half of the company or organization through this way to exchange the data from contributed by the other side. So this is, to be honest, it's not a very formal way, but we do some these kinds of try to do that. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. It's a good well, and it's a very creative way of, mobilizing the community and contribute quality data. And so earlier you said BAT's, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and work with BAI. So that's within the Chinese region. I hope we could also expand that. Is that your plan to expand that to include, member companies from other regions as well? Like for example, Linux LFAI and data. The reason that we changed LFAI, that was the original name for the foundation. But then later we added data because we understand without data, AI is not gonna be, high performing or work. So do you have plan to expand that?
Yeah. And I think this is a very good question. Since this year we do see that for example, to cover the broader domain, to do the better open source of data set, we do need to have this more diverse data from global. And on the other hand, we feel that only English and Chinese data is not enough. We do need to have the high quality data from other country, other language. So we hope, for example, if we can do this kind of things under the Linux AI and Data Foundation, that will be very great. So I know that in March, you will have the Linux Foundation Summit, and it will be good to discuss, have some topic to be discussed there, together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sounds great. Hey, I see Alexi, we probably need to change your name tag on your screen to your name. Maybe Sunny could help. So I'm glad you finally got into your hotel. I can see.
I got in my
It's on the
hotel.
way.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, we really
for-
appreciate you joining, because I know you are in the middle of a large AI conference. So yeah, really appreciate it. And so do you have anything to add in terms of, the challenges that you have faced in obtaining diverse data, and what are the possible solutions to overcome those challenges?
So, I can speak to kind of two things. So I used to be at IBM. I was the director of open source science and founder of that, which is a non-focus initiative. And then, now I'm at IFHS. There are two distinct perspectives. It really depends on, I think, the use case, right? And what is the business value. So at IBM, we actually built a so-called Blue Pile, which was the very, highly curated set of training data. So this idea, right, that you gather random data from the internet, usually Common Crawl is the source of data, right? And so you just get a bunch of dumps of, web pages, and you really don't know which of them contain, malicious materials, pornography, toxic content, maybe intentionally planted spyware and misinformation now, right? If you're going to train on this, you're going to get misleading results, and you may be actually liable. So IBM, as a kind of provider of choice to governments and really kind of important information, when they train their models, they did not try to, get ahead of everybody else in volume and get the biggest corpus. The core idea was, how do we ensure that our data is clearly traceable? We understand the provenance of everything which got into the training data. And as usual, because with this amount of information, you can never be sure. If you find some undesirable content, how do you quickly get rid of it and for your next retraining? So IBM was very good at this. The team which does the data warehouse presented that this LM Avalanche event, which I ran, one of the earliest LM conferences in 2023. And so that continues, right? So there is a lot of things to be said for very careful, business process, which ensures the data is correct, and also the tooling that comes with this, because you inevitably going to find mistakes and errors, and then you need to be able to quickly remove the data which is polluting your training data set. So that's one thing. So at Neo4j, we're in a very different position. We're the leaders in so-called graph rag approach, which is a set of best practices for building AI applications. And that's basically relies on so-called dark data or company data. So the whole rag pattern, right, is called into being by the fact that your company has lots and lots of so-called dark data. People call different terms. But generally, this is your business data. It cannot be online by definition. It's your proprietary board documents, it's your PDFs, it's your Slack, it's your email, it's your core know-how. So it will never be online. It will never be published. It will never be included. I mean, there are some now interesting approaches around blockchain that you can make something available for a fee, but they're not yet fully fleshed out. So for now, we can assume safely you want to guard your secrets, you don't want to infuse your data. So the RAG is basically putting a bunch of documents into a vector database and using that as a context for LLMs, which creates a danger because your context still can leak into the LLM if LLM is based abroad, right? If you're calling from one country into the other, you can never be sure that the data will be retained or not, right? So in that case, I think open source AI is clearly a winner because you can self-host your models, you can control the entire life cycle. So, but we are in that space where we really want to build the best application for the customer. And so we actually are very comfortable working with the customer, right? And like basically knowledge graphs, which are built as a part of this, should be built with customer data. So in that case, we care about business domain being represented properly, right? And then you can join this with leading open source models or proprietary models, depending on the use case and customer sensibilities, right? And then you can achieve the best results in your applications. So I think there are kind of a diversity of perspectives here. It really depends, right? Your use case will guide the level of tolerance you have for purity of data, right? And you want diverse data, I think, in the public data sets to enrich your proprietary company data.
Well, that's very interesting. You're saying use cases should drive the data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what about synthetic data? I mean, I hear people are saying more and more about synthetic data to supplement their data for model training. What do you guys think about the role of synthetic data? What does it play in addressing data diversity issues? Who would like to tackle that?
If I may, I think right now we see synthetic data as something new, but it's been a practice to augment the data with not the type of generative AI that we see today, but essentially generative AI. So it's not something new to utilize synthetic data and get the um, essentially information from the data you have and augment those, let's say with GAN or some other models, or simply by modification and adjusting the data to make them look like different. Uh, but what is right now known as synthetic data, I think goes more towards what we can achieve with the generative models, essentially extracting the information from the data that we have that is essentially a minority of the data, and then utilize this Gen AI model to build new data set that first, they cannot retrace back to the original data. So if the original data, let's say, is patient data or is copyright data, the security and privacy of those data would be preserved, but we preserve the fidelity of the data. So the synthetic data has the same distribution as it was for the original data, and it removes the limit because you cannot easily utilize HIPAA data or like data for the legal sector. But if you make this modification and generate this synthetic data, it enables you to have vast amount of data that doesn't immediately have similar like privacy and security concerns.
Awesome. That's very smart. How about Yonghua? Do you guys use synthetic data?
Yeah, actually, we use and built a lot of synthetic data. Yeah, actually, synthetic data. Let me say, in the whole AI domain, we have the synthetic data in long history. For example, in the very 10 years ago, when we built the computer vision, the model, we will do the data augmentation for the training data. For example, when we have a picture, we will usually use the different OpenCV library to make the picture have different rotation or add more noises to the data set so that we can have more a different scenario of the data in the rotation, in the different noise background. It will help the model to be more robust to do the classification, or more robust to do the object detection. So that's the traditional way when we do the augmentation of the data, and it's also a kind of synthetic data. And today, for the large model or the generative AI, we will have more need more strong the capability of the synthetic data. For example, we need the synthetic data to generate the synthetic data so that we can have more diversity of the labels. For example, for a same picture, we will need to do to generate more label for the same picture. And when we generate more label, usually we will use the other AI model to automatically generate the label for the data for the image, so that we can have the broader the description for the image. Then we can do the better the multimodal training. So that this is one way to help us to do the label diversity. The second way for us is to use the synthetic data to generate the synthetic data to help us to make a diversity of the instruction. For example, you can think about for a same article, we need to have different instruction pair for example, one is might do the summary for this article, or we can generate different question to do the answer according to the article's content. So for same article, we might generate tens of different instruction pair for the same article content. When we have these kinds of different more synthetic data for the instruction data set, it will really help us to generate better the post-training. Since today we do need a lot of SFT data set for the post-training. So this is also the synthetic data to play very important way. And the third one I can think about is synthetic data can help us to do more data preparation for the corner cases. For example, in the vehicle case or automotive vehicle case, we cannot do the always can get enough real world data set, especially to cover those very dangerous the corner cases. So in those kinds of domain, we will need the synthetic data, and usually it will generate from those simulator. And today, in the embodied AI for the robotic training data set, because human, we cannot get enough data with the real physical robot. is huge work to cover a lot of cases. So we will also use the sim to real or simulate or the simulation tools to generate a lot of data to train the robot. So these are all the synthetic data there can be more and more example. But one very important thing is, I think, to do the synthetic data, it is to broaden these kinds of label, instruction, or corner cases. But we cannot use the synthetic data or generate the new data to replace our knowledge. That means that for the knowledge, for the human-generated knowledge, that's still the very important part, as I do think is the foundation of the data set. Yeah.
Yeah. So human creativity is still very important.
Very
Can't
important.
be replaced by AI. That's good to know. Okay. Alexei, do you have anything to add from, you're from application perspective, use case perspective. Do you guys think that synthetic data can be helpful?
That's a very interesting question, right? So actually, I think I'm really happy that Yonghua covered this variety of cases, and I think I'm personally very suspicious of generating synthetic data, because your effectively assumptions in generating the data will translate into your findings. But there are cases like automotive, right, that you mentioned, that's plausible. So I think the kind of rule of thumb here is that you should not parrot your own generator. You should think of something external informing your synthetic data, such as physical, like simulation and physics models. We know how to think of car trajectories, right, which can be done without generative AI, but rather with real world processes. So simulations, right, I would say physics informed processes would be much safer. If you're going to generate a bunch of text, I would be suspicious, because your choices of generation will affect, basically, like you will find what you generate, like you will find what you put in there. So I would be more suspicious of this kind of generation, right? Like I would look for some kind of reality based process, right, which will allow you to simulate. Another interesting use case would be in IoT space, where we have the rise of digital twins, right? So, and there are things like BIM, right, building information models, and expensive machinery. So I would look at kind of this kind of system. So in graphs, we have connected systems, right? So people use knowledge graphs for storing knowledge, but they also use graphs to simulate network systems, which are, for instance, all the social networks, right? But also like your neurons in your brain, cells in your body. So I can think of ways where you would, model your system as a graph, and then you can run a bunch of random walks on a graph and graph algorithms, and people do that, right, for various purposes. So yeah, I would say there are some situations like this. You need to carefully think of your simulation process, synthesizing data, not really biasing your main model building.
Yeah, I understand. So is there any tool that you think we could use to make sure that there's enough diversity and the quality of data in the data sets? Are there any tools that out there that we could be using or you are using? Yonghua, do you guys have like benchmarks and tools to measure data diversity? How do you measure data diversity?
Yeah, actually, this is a good question. Today, I don't know if there will be those very standardized tool, but in BAAI, our data research team, we built our methodology to measure our data sets diversity. For example, we will create the 2D statistics and clustering view according to all those labels we need to cover. For example, usually when we do the data set creation, we will define what is the first level and second level label structure. Usually, finally, we might have more than 1,000 labels domains for the data set. So when we have a data set, then we will use this labeling the hierarchy, the structure, and use the DB scan, the clustering to do those kinds of 2D visualized view to do that. But I guess that today, I think today, we might not have a very common way to do that. So I believe, I guess different research team will have their way to do the measurement. And if there will be any powerful way already very good and be verified too, that will be very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully maybe in the future we'll have projects like that in under LFAI and data to help people measure data diversity. Royal, do you have any comments?
Yes, I wanted to add that on top of what I do, I'm also a Google developer expert. So I know Google in their essentially platform, they provide methods and applications and tools to actually measure data diversity. So they are that I think there is a data validator. I'm not sure about the name right now. I tried to Google it, but I couldn't find the exact name. But what it does, it measures all of the statistics of your data at the time of your training, and then it also measures it against your test data, and it measures it across time and the field data, which is very interesting because you can essentially build trigger that if the data has shifted and the skewness of data change, you can retrain the model without essentially human interaction, so it does it automatically. And the second thing is a lot of tools that we use are basically Python and Pandas code that we learn to throughout many years of practice to build. But for people who are not so technical, there is this other tool called Looker that is more geared toward, I would say, business analysts who don't want to like get their hands dirty with coding, so they can easily go and study the data distribution and correlation and as such.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would suspect that maybe, each company has their own kind of proprietary or some kind of test kits to measure data diversity. Alexi, do you have anything else to add?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think that, we have specific tools to do this, but, from the graph standpoint, it's always interesting because we model data as a graph, right? Which, like in the vector database and document database, you just drop them into a collection, right? And in graph, you also extract relationships, you extract named entities, and you can basically construct the graph of your data. Then you can use for traversals. So I think you could probably you can run a bunch of metrics, right? And I mean you can do this with the documents as well. But I think we have this superpower, which is a graph, to look at connectivity, and there are laws. There is zip flow, like basically there are laws that govern naturally occurring phenomena of connectivity, right? And naturally occurring networks, you have certain patterns. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's an interesting question, right? You could probably do this kind of analysis on the graphs, which result from your data, and see how they match up to different graphs, right, occurring in nature, and probably detect anomalies, and also have metrics of diversity.
Great, thanks. So
Annie, may I add one
Sure,
more point? Since the Laura and Alex they share very good point, especially those two. I feel that the have some high level challenge over there for the data diversity. Yeah, that means that if we want to build a data set or want to build a models, it quite depends on the high level requirements. So for example, if we want to build a multi-language model, then the high level requirement for diversity might be easy. For example, language, I can say, okay, 30 language. So then I can define the 30 language. Then we can do the statistic to see which language we have the more data and less data. But today, if we get the requirement that, okay, we need to do the provide a data set or model to do the financial industry, for example, then the high level definition for the financial industry, how to divide it into the different category or label enough, diversity enough. That's maybe the first question coming to my mind. That if we define that 10 category or 10 label will be diverse enough to cover all the industry. So that's another level of the challenge. I don't know how to deal with that in the more systematic way. Yeah. So just add this one point.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I want to move on to, ethics. So we know data diversity is very important, especially to the performance of the AI systems. But what about ethics? What are the ethical considerations come into play when you are with data diversity in generative AI? We've seen in the past that, some AI models come up with images that are, skewed towards specific racial, race and that kind of stuff. And can you guys think of any, ethical considerations when when you are considering your data acquisition for your generative AI training? Any taker?
I'm sorry if I'm starting again. So, I think we put it on the data, but we don't look into historically how much human have been biased and what we see right now in the data, especially when dealing with something like large language model, that to the point that Alex made essentially work with a lot of data crawl, so not much governance on the type of data. Then we examine them and we take them as biased with no study on how much bias we had within the data simply because we have been biased human being and history shows that. So if we have this racial bias or if we have gender bias um, in these models, it's simply because women could not go to university like for the until the past 100 years. I think way less than 100 years. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are talking about 1960s for women to go actually to university, and that goes further for people of color. It takes a lot of effort to go through the data, especially for large language model and large models that are taking billions and billions of data points to train billions of parameters and make sure that the data is not skewed toward a certain demographic or such. Not only it requires a lot of study and examination and finances, a fund to essentially back that effort, it requires some method to be able to uh, make that data fair and provide this new data, or at least in the again case of large language model, to have supervised fine tuning or different methods of instructing and adapting this model to later on adjust themselves against this racial or gender or any other type of biases. So mm, I think in brief, what I'm trying to say is AI is not biased. We have been biased for so long that we cannot clear it easily when we feed that data to our models.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Like you look at a lot of social media sites, right? A lot of people have bias, and on the internet, there's a lot of bias. So if we don't do a good job, doing data cleansing, so to speak, and provide quality data, then the AI that we're producing is going to be even more biased. So, anybody else wants to add to that? And how can we overcome this problem? Because, a lot of large AI models, they crawl the internet, and internet has a lot of toxic, um, messages out there, especially social media sites. How do we overcome that? While, there's a balance that we want to acquire as much data as we can, but at the same time, there's a lot of toxic data out there. So how do we strike a balance and ensure that we're building an ethical AI?
I can tackle it a bit. So I think a lot of problems in AI right now comes from the fact that it's basically a toy in many cases, like a chatbot. There is a general chatbot available for people, right? They will chat to it. The chatbot is trained on all kinds of data. So the problem basically happens from the lack of the well-defined use case. So there was a famous meme that Amazon brought a chatbot to its shopping site, and instead of asking it about the product, people asked it about the meaning of life, and the bot happily obliged and started chatting with the customers, right, about something else rather than the product on the page that they were supposed to be discussing. So I think, first of all, majority of use cases will not suffer from this, because if you have industrial machinery, as I give this example, like the smart screwdriver should think about its work, right? The smart screwdriver should, screw in the screws sufficiently without damaging them, do it fast and properly, and or the smart tool drilling the wall, smart drill should think about drilling and not hitting electric wire, should not talk to you about meaning of life or something like this, right? So majority of use cases will naturally, once we really have deployed them in production, be constrained. So second, there will be small models. We do not need large language models for industrial applications or domain applications. The models will be trained on business data, right? And there will be no question of this. But I think also it's very important what we learn from early Gemini disaster, when it basically generated founders which did not exist and so forth. So by kind of imposing your own expectation in your own cultural bias on the model, you actually do everybody disservice, because you diminish the trust in the model, you make it laughable, and everybody questions your organization, you did the gathering process, right? And so what I think is very important for general purpose, again, there should be multiple use cases. If you're fighting hate and misinformation on the internet in your job, you're in the government agency, then you should train on completely unadulterated data. And for instance, I know that government agencies who do this, they have special access to some of the largest models, which they arrange specifically to train against threats. And in this case, right, the companies that provide them unadulterated data, which is not available to general public, because their case is exactly the opposite. They want to find the source of this misinformation, planted biases, psyops, and they want to confront them. Right. So if you are, I think, building a product, we all should focus, what do you want to achieve, right? Because if you just build, you're not $100 banknote to be liked by everybody, right? You cannot put a general purpose chatbot online and make everybody happy. So I think that's the question. What's your use case? What are the biases you want to avoid, right? What are the truths you want to uncover? And you really should optimize going from there, because asking a very general question will not get us far and will not please everybody, and somebody will suffer as a result.
Okay, thank you. Well, we are actually approaching the top of the hour, so I would like to ask the panelists to spend a minute, each one of you, just to share with us any parting thoughts you would like to share with our audience. Who would like to start? Anything you want to, announce, or anything you want to inspire our community, or anything you want, encourage the community to follow? Yeah, it's your time. Royal, would you like to start?
Certainly. Thank you so much again for having me here. It was a very interesting conversation. And to those who are out there and working in the field, in addition to requesting and begging them to work on the data to make sure that these models are what we design them to be, I also encourage every scientist and engineer out there to ask themselves whether this product must be made or it's better to left undone. There are applications of generative AI that I think are Pandora's boxes. So definitely ask this question of yourself. And for those who are not in the field, I strongly encourage them to start learning about AI, because it's going to be a part of our lives. If it's not right now and you don't feel it right now, I'm certain that in the next 2 to 5 years, everybody would be essentially emerge in this field. So I invite you to learn about this. And lastly, we are hosting International Women's Day in Boston on March 7th. I use this platform to invite everybody who are local to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Yonghua.
Yeah, for the data diversity and also the ethical issues of the AI data, I do see this is a global issue, and also that we need to collaborate globally, because it depend also the need to have the collaboration from different culture or countries. So I do think that under the Linux AI and Data Foundation, if we can have some program to work together in global, that will be very helpful. Yeah.
Great. Alexi?
So really appreciate this, conversation. Inspires a lot of ideas. I think, as everything in data science, we need to measure, right? So for diversity, we need to come up with proper metrics, which can be textual, which can be graph. I think it would be super cool to see more of this. And in terms of, projects to collaborate, I invite everybody to check out Open Source AI Knowledge Stack, or OAKS. You can find it at oaks.town. And that's a collaboratory. So this is basically a technosocial space where we put together various startups doing open source tools to build applications end to end, right? And so we focus on knowledge flowing through an application. As I mentioned before, kind of your key business knowledge is what is really important. And we can track kind of structured input, parsing, data transformation, and structured output, which produces the results which are actually actionable in your business applications. And I think when we look at when we think of what is knowledge in your business, how you represent, a lot of this knowledge comes from data and diverse data. And then if you think about knowledge, then I think it really clarifies a bunch of aspects of GenAI applications. So I invite everybody to check it out. And I think it's a good reminder that Generative AI Commons, of which Shani is a co-chair, right? And I was one of the founders as well. Generative AI Commons is open to all startups, not just Linux Foundation members. So if you are a startup thinking of working with LFAI, joining GenAI Commons is a great way to do this. Joining Oaks is also a good way to find kind of structure and context, like place yourself, find yourself in this, join and think about your data and knowledge, which you can apply to GenAI.
Thank you so much, Alexi, for the plug. Yeah. So I'd like to invite all of you guys to join us, Generative AI Commons. You can go to our website, https genaicommons.org. Okay, and we meet bi-weekly, and we have guest speakers, and Neo4j and BAI are also part of the community, and they do a lot of collaboration in the community. We welcome all of you guys joining us. And again, we host this webinar quarterly, and please reach out to myself. And if there's any interesting topic you would like to hear about in the future, please let me know. Thank you again. Thank you, panelists, for the amazing panel. And thank you, audience. And we really appreciate your time. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you, everyone. You have a good day or a good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
thank you, guys. See you later. Bye.